Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something pretty complex, diffusion bridge models.
Oh, yeah.
These models are all about turning one image into another.
Like magic.
Kind of like magic, but with algorithms.
Yeah.
Taking a blurry old photo and making it tack sharp.
Yeah.
Or turning a rough sketch into like a hyper-realistic image.
Exactly.
So that's the power of diffusion bridge models, or DBMs for short.
DBMs, yeah. What's really cool about them is that they don't just edit pixels. They kind of create this bridge between the starting image and the desired outcome. Like imagine you're gradually morphing one picture into another, and you're smoothing out the differences kind of step by step.
Okay, yeah, I'm picturing it, but you know me. I always gotta ask, what's the catch?
Right.
Something this cool can't be that easy, right?
You're right, there is a trade-off.
Okay.
These models can be really slow because
Oh.
each step in that morphing process takes time and computing power.
Yeah.
So while the results are incredible, it can be a real bottleneck, especially if you're thinking about real-time applications.
Okay, so there it is. But isn't that what this deep dive is all about?
Yeah,
We've got some research on a technique called inverse bridge matching distillation, or IBMD for short.
that's right, IBMD.
Is this the solution to the speed problem?
IBMD is specifically designed to tackle that slow inference problem. And what's really exciting is that it might not just be about speed.
Okay.
Early research suggests that IBMD could actually make the output quality even better.
Hold on, so faster and better.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's just break down what bridge matching actually means.
Sure.
You used that morphing analogy,
Yeah.
but could you give us like a more concrete definition?
Sure. Imagine you have a blurry photo and a sharp photo, the same thing.
Okay.
Bridge matching is basically finding the process that smoothly transforms the blurry one into the sharp one.
Okay, so it's not just sharpening, it's finding the exact path to go from blurry to perfect, like a GPS for images.
Yeah, you got it.
I'm starting to see why this is computationally heavy.
Exactly. And there are actually two main types of bridge matching.
Okay.
You have unconditional and conditional, sometimes called augmented.
Okay.
So unconditional is like finding a universal sharpening filter.
Okay.
Conditional is tailoring that process to the specific image you're starting with.
So it's like a custom filter?
Yeah, like a custom filter for each photo.
Interesting. So unconditional is kind of like broad strokes, and conditional is getting into the fine details.
Exactly.
I'm guessing both are useful, but for different situations.
Exactly. Now, you also mentioned something called a diffusion bridge and mixture of bridges in the source material.
Yes.
What are those?
Right, I saw those terms and was hoping you could shed some light on those. It sounds pretty complex.
So a diffusion bridge is essentially the specific path our image transformation takes.
Okay.
Think of it as the precise sequence of changes from blurry to sharp. A mixture of bridges considers all the possible paths between all pairs of images.
Wow.
It's like looking at all the different ways you could possibly morph one image into another.
Okay, that's starting to make sense.
Yep.
But let's get back to the speed problem.
Sure.
Just how much of a bottleneck are we talking about here?
It's a significant hurdle, especially for things like real-time image editing or video processing,
Yeah,
because each step in the process takes time and computational resources,
right.
and those steps can really add up.
So before IBMD came along, were there any other attempts to kind of speed things up? What were researchers trying?
There have been efforts including things like advanced samplers and something called consistency distillation.
Okay.
These try to make the steps more efficient or find ways to make the model learn faster,
Okay.
but they have limitations.
Yeah.
Some only work for conditional DBMs.
Uh-huh.
Others still require multiple steps.
Okay.
So finding a truly fast, one-size-fits-all solution was a real challenge.
So IBMD is claiming to be that holy grail faster, more versatile. You said it might even be better.
Right.
Spill the beans. What makes it so innovative?
So IBMD is a game changer for a few reasons. First, it's incredibly versatile.
Okay.
It works with both unconditional and conditional DBMs. This is huge because, as we discuss, these two types of bridge matching often need different approaches for speed improvements.
So it's like the universal translator of the DBM world.
Yeah, you could say that.
But how about the speed improvements? What kind of numbers are we talking
This
about?
is where it gets really exciting.
Okay.
IBMD can potentially distill these complex DBMs down to something that requires only one step.
Wait, a single step.
Imagine getting that complex transformation in a single computational leap.
From thousands.
Yeah.
That's practically teleportation.
All right.
Real-time image enhancement on our devices, maybe even revolutionizing how creative professionals work with images.
Exactly.
But hold on, there's one thing I need to clarify.
Okay.
You mentioned that IBMD can do this without actually seeing that perfect target image.
Right.
How is that even possible?
That's a great question.
Don't you need to know what the ideal outcome looks like?
That highlights one of the most ingenious aspects of IBMD.
Okay.
It's not about matching the transformation directly. It's about figuring out what transformation would have created the model we already have.
Mm.
It's like reverse engineering the process.
So instead of showing the model the before and after, it's figuring out the how based on the model itself.
You got it.
Mind-bending.
It is pretty cool.
But how does it actually do that?
So IBMD uses two key players.
Okay.
A teacher model, which is the original slow DBM that we want to speed up,
Okay.
and a student model, which is a simpler model that we're training to mimic the teacher but do it much faster.
Okay, I'm with you. Teacher shows the student the ropes, student learns to do it faster.
Right?
But how do you teach a computer to do something as abstract as reverse engineer a data transformation?
That's what the math comes in.
Oh boy.
The researchers found a way to translate this abstract problem into something a computer can actually work with.
Okay.
They use a technique called gradient methods, which is basically a way for computers to learn and optimize processes.
So they turn this mind-bending concept into something a computer can understand and solve.
Exactly.
Pretty slick.
Yeah.
But theory is one thing. Does this actually work in practice?
Do we have result?
Yeah, do we have results?
We do. And they're pretty impressive to find out. You'll have to stay tuned for part 2 of the deep dive.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
A little bit of a cliffhanger.
All right, well, we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to the deep dive. We left off with some serious suspense, IBMD, and those experimental results. I'm ready for the big reveal.
All right, let's do it.
Let's dive into the specifics. How did they test this thing? What kind of image challenges did they throw at it?
So the researchers, they took kind of a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
They tested IBMD on both unconditional and conditional DBMs.
Right.
Remember, that was one of the initial breakthroughs, was its versatility.
Yeah.
Existing methods often specialized in one or the other.
Right. So IBMD was already stepping out of the box.
Yeah.
But did it actually deliver on the speed and the quality?
Let's start with the unconditional side.
Okay.
They used pre-trained models based on a technique called I2SB.
I2SB.
It stands for image-to-image Schrödinger bridge.
Okay.
A mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
And they focused on tasks that are super relevant to anyone who uses a camera.
Okay.
Super resolution, JPEG restoration, and in-painting.
Stop right there. Those are problems I face almost daily.
Right. Who hasn't wished for a magic wand to sharpen a blurry photo or fix those compression artifacts?
Exactly.
What happened when they put IBMD to the test?
So for super resolution, they used a classic dataset called ImageNet,
ImageNet.
which is like the ultimate image library.
Okay.
And they cranked up the difficulty by doing 4x upscaling,
Whoa, 4x.
meaning they took a low-res image and tried to increase its resolution fourfold without making it look pixelated.
Wow, that's like turning a thumbnail into a poster.
Yeah. I'm picturing a blurry mess. What happened?
The results were mind-blowing.
Okay.
The single-step IBMD model actually outperformed the original model, which used 1,000 steps,
Wait, hold on.
not just in speed, but also in image quality.
A single step beat out 1,000 steps.
That's right, they used a metric called SHVID,
FID?
which basically measures how realistic a generated image is,
Okay.
and IBMD scored higher.
That's like teleporting versus trekking across a continent. How is that even possible?
Remember our earlier conversation about error accumulation?
Uh-huh.
Taking fewer steps means fewer chances for errors to creep in.
Right.
It's like taking a direct flight instead of one with multiple layovers. You're less likely to lose your luggage along the way.
That's a brilliant analogy. Okay, so super resolution is a win. What about JPEG restoration? Can IBMD save us from those dreaded compression artifacts?
So for JPEGs, they tested images with varying degrees of compression.
Okay.
Some really heavily compressed, and again, the single-step IBMD model came out on top.
What?
Producing results almost as good as the original 1,000-step model.
Okay.
And get this, it was about 100 times faster.
100 times we're talking milliseconds instead of minutes. Suddenly, real-time image enhancement on our phones doesn't seem so far-fetched.
Exactly.
This could be huge. Okay, what about in-painting? Filling in missing parts of an image seems a lot more complex.
You're right, in-painting is trickier.
Yeah.
They tested removing like a square from the center of an image
Okay.
and having the model fill it in here. The single-step model wasn't quite as good.
Okay.
But the two-step and four-step models were really close to the original while still achieving a 5x speedup.
So even for tough tasks, IBMD finds a balance between speed and quality. Very impressive. But so far we've been talking about unconditional DBMs.
Right.
What about conditional? Did IBMD show similar promise there?
Absolutely. In fact, this is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Because we can start comparing IBMD to other acceleration techniques.
All right, bring on the competition.
So the researchers used a different type of DBM called Denoising Diffusion Bridge Model, or DDBM,
Denoising Diffusion Bridge Model.
which is specifically designed for conditional bridge matching.
Okay.
And they tested IBMD on tasks like turning sketches into images and using surface information to generate realistic photos.
Okay, so now we're getting into the real competition. Did IBMD hold its own against the specialists?
Not only did it hold its own, it actually outperformed some of the leading methods, including one called CDBM, or Consistency Diffusion Bridge Model.
Wow, so IBMD is a universal solution that's potentially even better than the state of the art. In some cases, that's a bold claim. What were some of the highlights?
So for sketch to image, they used a dataset called Edge's handbags,
Edge's handbags.
which, as you might guess, has images of handbags and their outlines.
Right.
With just one step, IBMD was 50 times faster than the original DBM model and produced images that were just as good or even better.
Again, with that single-step magic, it's like IBMD is absorbing the teacher's knowledge instantaneously amazing. What about using surface information to generate images? That sounds pretty technical.
Yeah, for that they used a dataset called Dye-Out Outdoor,
Die outdoor.
which has images of outdoor scenes paired with what are called normal maps.
Normal maps.
They basically describe the direction a surface is facing.
Okay.
Here, the two-step IBMD outperformed CDBM and achieved similar results to another technique called DBI, or Diffusion Bridge Implicit Model.
DBI.
Even with just one step, IBMD was still quite good, showing its adaptability.
So it seems like the more complex the task, the more steps might be needed. But even then, IBMD is still delivering significant speedups. This is really exciting stuff. But hold on, before we go any further, you mentioned some concerns about how these models were evaluated. Can you remind us what those were?
You're right. For the Edge's handbags and Diet Outdoor datasets, the researchers followed an existing protocol that involved testing the models on the same data they were trained on.
Yeah.
This isn't ideal because it doesn't tell us how well they'd perform on totally new images.
Ah, right. It's like taking a test where you already know all the answers doesn't tell you much about your actual understanding. So how did the researchers address this?
Thankfully, they were very transparent about this limitation.
Okay, good.
They also showed examples of how the models performed on a separate set of images that they hadn't seen before.
Okay.
And the good news is the results were very similar to the ones from the training data.
Okay, that's reassuring. Transparency is key. And it sounds like the researchers were very careful to acknowledge this potential issue and provide evidence to back up their claims. Okay, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, let's recap. IBMD can speed up both unconditional and conditional DBMs, making them practical for things like real-time image enhancement. It can even outperform some specialized techniques. This is pretty groundbreaking stuff, right?
Absolutely, we're witnessing a potential paradigm shift in image processing.
Wow.
But this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Ooh.
There's so much more to uncover about IBMD and its implications.
Okay, now you've really got me hooked. I can't wait to see what else is in store, but that my friends will have to wait for part 3 of the deep dive. Stay tuned. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into IBMD. I'm still reeling from those experimental results. Faster, better, more versatile. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is exciting, but, it's important to remember that IBMD is still a pretty young technology.
Right.
Think of it as a powerful new engine, but we're still kind of learning how to drive it.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't like machine learning experts, what should we be watching for as this technology develops? What are the big make or break moments for IBMD?
Well, one thing to keep an eye on is how IBMD handles real-world images.
Okay.
Remember we talked about those experiments with super resolution and JPEG restoration?
Yeah.
Those were pretty idealized scenarios.
Right.
Real-world photos, they're often messy, lots of noise, different types of blur, all sorts of imperfections.
Right. It's one thing to ace a test with pristine textbook examples, but the real world is more like a pop quiz with messy handwritten notes. So robustness to noise is a key factor. What else?
Another challenge is scaling up to higher resolution images.
Okay.
Think 4K video, or even those massive images used in scientific research.
Yeah.
As the resolution increases those computational demands, they really skyrocket.
Ah, so those memory requirements we talked about earlier could become a real bottleneck. It'll be interesting to see if IBMD can handle the big leagues of image processing.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the potential for integration with other AI techniques.
Right.
We've been focusing on IBMD in isolation.
Yeah.
But imagine combining it with something like generative adversarial networks, or GANs.
Oh, wow.
That's where things could get really interesting.
Combining the speed of IBMD with the creative power of GANs, now that's a recipe for some mind-blowing applications.
Absolutely. But as with any powerful tool, we need to be mindful of its limitations and potential downsides.
Right, of course.
We've touched on computational costs and memory requirements, but there's also the question of, unexpected behaviors.
That's a great point. Even with the best intentions, AI can sometimes produce surprising, even unwanted results. It's like giving someone a super fast car. It's amazing if they're a skilled driver, but potentially dangerous in the wrong hands.
Precisely, as researchers continue to develop and refine IBMD, it will be crucial to carefully study and understand those potential pitfalls.
It sounds like we're still in the very early stages of this journey, but the possibilities are truly exciting. What's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember about IBMD?
I think the biggest takeaway is that IBMD has the potential to revolutionize how we interact with images.
Hmm.
Faster, more efficient, potentially even more accurate. It could impact everything from the photos on our phones to the way medical professionals diagnose diseases.
That's a powerful message. It's been a wild ride exploring the world of IBMD. With you, any parting thoughts for our listeners as we wrap up this deep dive?
Remember, this is just a starting point. Stay curious, keep exploring, and who knows what amazing discoveries you'll make.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll be signing off until next time. Keep those brains buzzing.